to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Review and approval of minutes, television rating review. And so we're gonna bring it straight to new business.
All right, so we have a new policy that has come to our attention. It's JV service dog policy. You already know we have a therapy dog policy in place, but the service dog policy is something that we do not have currently. So, service animal, sorry. Did I put dog on there?
No, you put animals.
Okay. And so you've all had the agenda ahead of time, so I just want you to go ahead and take a minute and review and
The
then,
agenda you did.
I thought I was reading here. And give us some feedback. A lot of this, would you like an agenda? A lot of the language comes from the American Disabilities Act, so it's kind of already been something that has been taken right from that particular language. So as I was saying, a lot of the language is pretty much word for word right from that language.
I guess I'm saying, what is that?
I also said that to the actor, but, any comments or questions? Yeah, not gonna be enough time. I'm sorry.
No, so. I'm ready to go. I guess I had a question, but it was answered a little further down. I guess my concern is around health records and proof. Those are the only two things, because I've had experiences where people slap a vest on a dog and say, oh, it's a service dog in training, it's this and that.
Yeah.
So I just feel like there should be, I'm not against it at all,
Yeah.
but there should be some standard of identification, maybe like, I don't know, that was a concern I had. Health records, making sure that, you know, and that's talked about on the next page. On part D, number E, I had a question around allergies. When it talks about posing a direct threat to the safety of others. My concern wasn't in the temperament of the service animal, but more in allergies or something like that. On E, I wonder if the letter A between to and school property should be removed. So it should say damages to school property and injuries. And then I have a question around insurance liability on the service animal, because it talks about the WPD having $1 million insurance policy on their dog, but I don't know where that falls here if something happens with the service animal.
No. When a service animal is trained to be a service animal, I'm assuming when they're done with their training, they get some sort of certification, documentation, license,
And you have to have a disability.
medical information as far as vaccination for the dog and the rest of it. I would think that when somebody puts in that written request, that they need to provide all that to the school department prior to. Correct.
And I would think that, I believe there's language in there that it almost looks a little confusing from a principal perspective, like what you can ask and what you can't ask. And so I think the difference is those in that disability, mental health, special ed realm can get those documents in order, but a random person can't question whether they have whatever it is that we're looking for. So I think that's the protection of that, like HIPAA or whatever it is that we're looking for. But
Well, then it is confusing on the,
I did find some of the language a little bit confusing, so.
yeah, the, third paragraph down under general, where it says, except as otherwise specified in this policy, school officials will not inquire about the nature, extent of the individual's disability or require the individual to provide documentation that the animal is a service animal. So, yeah, I think you don't have a right to inquire as to nature of disability and so on, but I think the school certainly has a right for documentation to prevent someone just slapping a service
Yes,
vest on an animal.
Agreed. They require the individual to provide documentation that the animal is a service animal. That says you can't do that, but
I
I
think you
would think
should,
we would have to do that.
because,
I mean, every golden retriever is very kind with a vest on, but it doesn't mean they're a service animal.
No, we talked about that, about making it like, obviously, we would say school psychology, debating on nurses, like, who really,
Okay, so
yeah, while still protecting.
it was written, and I think it's honestly, there was.
So we did it, so, let me just look it up. That was, with the school, when you were introducing that, we knew that was a thing.
So I'm wondering if that sentence, we could write, except as otherwise specified in this policy, school officials will not inquire about the nature or extent of the individual's disability, but
period.
may require the individual to provide documentation that the animal is a service animal.
Yeah.
Is a certified service animal, is a,
Specify who's required to know.
I was trying to look it up. I think it,
Yeah.
again, down below, like, there's like, when it's getting written through the IEP process, because you have to have a disability, right? So
Correct.
that team can have information based on that. But I think, to your point, if you want it more clearly defined about, I think it's who's asking, like, you can't just question someone like, is that, I think there's certain questions you can ask and can't ask, and I'm trying to find it, but it says, spelled out like, you can go ahead and ask this, but you can't ask it like that.
well, not
But
asking anything with the disability, just asking whether or not the
Yeah.
dog
Is
is certified as
Where are
a,
the papers?
So
as-
wouldn't that be part of the process of the IEP? Is that what you're saying you want it spelled
Well,
out?
I think
that particular dog
I think
is the
some
one
people
that's-
might try to bring a dog in that is not
Is
part of an
maybe their
IEP.
pet.
People do it all the time. They
Yep.
slap a vest on their animal. They say it's my service animal. And there's not, the dog has, or whatever, because we've seen service peacocks at airports. They haven't gone through training or whatever.
Yeah, 'cause it
Tracy,
does-
will you show me again where you were?
Okay.
Like, third
The
paragraph.
part, yeah, where it starts with school officials?
Yep.
Down the second to last sentence, where it starts with, except as otherwise specified in this policy. You see that?
No, where?
Thank you.
Except right here.
There it is, okay.
Okay.
Except as otherwise specified in this policy, school officials will not inquire about the nature or extent of the individual's disability, comma, but may require the individual, where it says or, strike or, and put in but may, require the individual to provide documentation that the animal is a qualified service animal, a
Certified.
certified service
Certified.
animal,
Certified.
certified.
Through a recognized organization.
I think you've got to be careful because the ADA requirements and laws are very specific that you cannot ask.
You can't
Right.
ask for documentation.
And
How about the dog?
And you can
Yes.
also get private.
Really?
if you could bring that up, Paul,
Yeah.
because I can't do both of those things, but it does say exactly what you
And you
can
can also
and
get
can't
private
say.
training, you can go through specific just.
Yeah, I know, but even if you got private training, I would think they'd give you a little certificate after.
So it says,
The other ones that really are that, are like seeing eye, because they have to go through like school,
Yeah.
like schooling, but I mean,
But
there's
they,
so many different levels of.
Huh,
but the dogs that, can recognize seizures coming,
Right.
they
that
get training
For
too.
sure.
So I'll just read quickly. It says, when it is not obvious what service an animal provides, only limited inquiries are allowed. Staff may ask 2 questions. Is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Staff cannot ask about the person's disability, required medical documentation, require a special identification card or training documentation for the dog,
oh,
ask
That's
the dog
cool.
demonstrate its ability to perform a task or work.
But you
Wow.
do, but you
Okay.
do have permission to ask
Never
the rescue if they're not trained.
sounds like you can't ask anything.
No, you can, because we could do it in restaurants.
But it,
I live in LA.
Well,
it also says up in
If
the
you're-
the second paragraph about not housebroken. I mean, how would it even get through the
That's kind
training
of like,
process if it's not
right, that's
housebroken?
kind of like the line where you know if it's really a trained dog or not, because they should not move, they should be able to sit, so. It's probably where the borderline is, but I don't know how to put that in a policy even.
And also, there are only 2 reasons that the animal can be removed: if it's out of control, the handler can't control the dog, or if it's not housebroken.
Okay, so we are not changing anything in that paragraph.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say, that this is really coming right from ADA. There's nothing that.
Because it's not asking
Well, we
anything
can
about.
add the,
But you-
we can add what he
disability.
just read though.
Yeah,
About
you could,
if,
I thought it was in here.
That is on the next page, and about if the dog's out of control or not
Yeah.
housebroken,
No,
or that's all
but
listed in.
about asking if it's been trained. You can ask if it, you can't ask for documentation, but you can ask if it's
All
been
right, so
trained.
am I striking what you said
Right.
before, right?
Sure, and I could
And
put
they
a
can
vest
say,
on a
I
dog
know,
and say
no, I know.
yes.
I trained it myself.
Correct.
I spent, you know,
Yeah, that's, okay, never mind.
I guess the reality is, I mean, most people, I feel like that this is a legit thing, would have that information anyways, usually they're gonna talk with the psychologist and everything. We will have that.
There's a process. It's not, it shouldn't just show, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the difference. Where would you like me to add the exceptions? Is that what you're asking to put that in, or?
well, the ones that he read that you can ask, if it's been trained, right?
Yeah, I think they're in there.
It's
I
in
did
there.
too. I thought it was
Yeah.
very hard to
All right.
find it while in here. But go ahead and keep looking, because if you haven't read it, I think it does start to make sense, but you do have to read it a couple of times. That's how I felt like I had to compare and.
But yeah, because this is removal of service animal,
Yeah.
so I mean, it says if the animal's not housebroken, so it is in there. The only way I feel like is school officials can do document like
The school
in
officials. are-
conjunction with just IP or, I don't know what that is.
Well, it looks like the special ed department will be in charge
Yeah,
of all of that.
Yeah, IP, so that's what it is.
I mean, it's probably not gonna be in the show unless somebody comes with a pony.
I don't, yeah, I don't.
And then maybe.
Peacock.
I guess it's just, I mean, I think high school will be a little challenging with allergies.
Any school with that, yeah.
Any school, and
Yeah.
that is called out as well, like in the ADA, it will say you have to make, you know, accommodations either with the student or find a
It's
classroom.
no
that
different
works.
getting on a flight.
Yeah.
If you're on a plane,
Yeah.
you know, confined atmosphere and you have allergies, I have allergies. Somebody gets on there with a service dog, I mean, take an allergy pill, there's not much way around it.
I think on a plane though, there's better air filtration systems, like it swaps out the
Yeah,
air.
and
We have all the
It
new
is.
HVAC systems.
It is,
now that
absolutely.
filter all that
No,
and give us a little AC.
yeah.
And the plane, you're in the classroom, so you're a kid with allergies.
Yeah.
You might get switched just because somebody else brings in an animal. I don't think
Correct.
that's fair.
So
Maybe the other.
Well.
I have a question on that. Do we have to notify, like, is there something to notify the students or the families of the students that are in that classroom? Because as a parent, I might not notify the school that my son is allergic to dogs
Right.
because
Correct.
I'm not expecting him to come in
Well-
contact with the dog. You know, they might know he's allergic to strawberries or red
Right.
dye because of food issues.
That-
So I just wonder about that, like, is there something that goes out? It doesn't have to say who the student is or what the
Yeah.
disability is or anything, just that there is a service animal that has fur or, you know.
Correct. The other issue is too, there are many children that have trauma related to dogs,
That's true.
and other animals too. So if you don't get a heads up that there's a dog coming into the room, that could trigger some things too for some kids. You know, they're usually very kind and very docile and very nice, but you know, you want to give a heads up. I don't know, can we do that or is that also not
Would be a
legal?
question that we have to ask. I have no idea.
I mean, why would that be on privacy? Just so.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know that it would be, but I have that as a question to ask.
Stranger laws have been written, so who knows?
Other than what we have in front of, like, let's
This
concentrate
looks
on
good,
this,
yeah.
but if there are other questions, I can ask, Andrew, our legal person, if that can be something, or procedure wise, like what do you do when you know that you're gonna have a dog?
On part E, I don't know if you heard me earlier, damages to, it says a school property, should it just be damages to
I
school
did strike
property?
that.
Okay, I can't see that.
Cause it does look like it was a typo. Where is that?
And then the only other question I have is there insurance on this, liability insurance or
Really good
something else
question.
on this animal?
I believe that that's required of
All right,
all
'cause I
service
didn't-
animals.
When I looked through this, I didn't see that except for on the last page where it talked about the WPD number 7, a $1 million per occurrence to cover any injuries caused by a service animal. So, you know, I have a friend whose horse backed into a pickup truck at a horse show, big dent on it. Her insurance had to pick up and cover it. So little things like that we might not necessarily think about.
Yeah, should that be included in where like vaccinations and health and control and that kind of thing? Maybe a number 5.
Liability insurance.
Liability insurance?
I believe we can. And I feel like because it's in the therapy dog one, that you have to have insurance.
Yeah.
I feel like this is gonna be part of the certification that they have to have as
Yeah.
well, but we'll put it in and see what. Okay, all right, so where would you like that to fit? Under which section? Charges?
Requirements prior to bringing a service animal in?
Yeah,
B number 5,
that makes.
liability insurance?
I think I think it's
Vaccinations,
gonna-
health, control.
It's not even homeowner insurance. What if you go on?
I don't think it can be homeowners. I don't think our
What
therapy dogs can.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Special like rides.
That's part of the
Yeah.
problem with one of the ones that wants to come in, because you can't go through your home insurance. It has to be specific agency.
You see a lot of issues with F though. I kept laughing over F that like, go to a school play and somebody would actually try to charge a $7 admission ticket.
Oh, prom tickets.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what we were laughing at.
Like Prom
We were
tickets,
like,
is
yeah.
that a thing?
Where,
Yeah.
Would actually
where's your
try to
But it
ticket?
actually is in the ADA. They spelled out that they should not be charged. Yeah.
I mean, that's $60 for the.
So we were
Yeah.
saying,
Ticket up a
You
seat.
like a little ticket.
And P-PAC.
Stamp it for.
Yup. All right, so liability insurance, all service animals, is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Are required to have documentation of insurance, documentation of any
Proof of insurance.
Yeah.
insurance. Yeah, that was interesting picturing the horse at the prom.
Yeah, with a little ticket.
I always picture the horse,
Little
because I think they're
tutu
so cute. Like,
They are cute.
Federal state law mandates liability insurance for specifically for service animals.
yeah, I think it's all part. If you have a certified animal, then it's gonna be a
Yes.
part of that.
Yes.
But if, again, somebody is slapping a vest on a dog.
But they
and-
wouldn't get in, like, that's where, like, you would have to be able to say it's followed the process, like,
Right,
right?
well,
But
somebody,
if we
right,
can't ask them if they
if it's trained, I mean, or.
We can only
rather
ask if they're
certified.
trained, but we can't ask if they're certified or if they're
Or what
anything
is-
else.
Right, but I think
So-
your team at your school would know.
So-
They're not coming in
No,
without-
we're not talking about
Oh, I'm
people with legitimate service dogs. We're talking about people who buy the vests, put it on their dog, who's just a pet, and this is my service
And
dog.
their child has an
And don't put
IEP
it
and has a
pat-
meeting
Or
and
the
says,
child might not have an
and you
IEP.
legally can't ask.
Well, I think
Yeah.
there are people at the school, because then that's where you can go through the, like, so now you have a meeting, you can figure out like who, what the disability, what is the task or the work
But
where is the paper?
I think this needs to be in, because
Yep.
no child with no disability decides to bring dog to school with vest on.
Well, this is prior written request.
Well, it's,
Well,
Yeah,
but they
yes.
will, look, a high,
and it says
in
it
a
has to
high,
be
they
written
will.
into a 504.
I'll give you a little
doesn't it?
story. A couple of years ago, we did Spirit Week. We had one of those anything but a backpack days. We had kids bring their younger siblings in.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
We
I
had
was there
kids
that-
bring pets.
But
They,
to
they
carry
brought
their
their
books?
dogs in to carry their books around. They were there, anything but a backpack. So there were a lot of phone calls home. Hey, do you know your younger child is in the building? Hey, do you know your pet is in the building? Come get them. So anyone can try anything.
Well,
So-
up here though, it says if the general service animal means a dog that has been trained as a guide dog, as a hearing dog, or has been specially trained to work or perform tasks
Right,
to the benefit of an individual with a disability,
right.
other than sight or hearing. So it would not be a regular ed student that does not have
A regular
disability.
ed student may try to bring their pet in and call it a service dog. And
But if they
a-
don't have a disability that falls under these
Correct, then
guidelines,
they're
then
not
have to go
entitled to
over
it.
You can ask,
Correct.
Correct.
What service do they perform? And I'm almost
Yeah,
positive.
well, I think you're gonna know
I
whether or
think
not.
what Darlene's saying though too, because I can see it playing out too in secondary a little bit, because these guys are clever, right? So,
They get a
according to
vest.
C, you can have a disability other than sight or hearing. Examples might include retreatment, right? So me and my family want me to bring my pet into school. And you say what, because you are permitted, according to what Paul said, to ask what service it provides. It provides, reminding me to take my medication, because let's say I do take medication.
We have a nurse for that.
And well, but I get to bring it in according to this, and then you say, can I see your documentation? And I say, according to the ADA that Paul
We
just read,
can't
you can't ask me. for
Well,
it."
you couldn't just, but I think we're getting tripped up. Those kids still could exist and
Mhm.
start walking through the door any day with these dogs or
Sure.
whatever, but there is
We've had
a process to go through.
But they don't want
They
to follow
go
the
through the whole
process.
process, they can still
this
get
gonna
a dog.
stop
and they
that?
will.
Well, it says they
No,
need,
well,
But
it's
no,
something
but it
really
allows
wants to
us,
do
if it
though.
says in here,
This is-
that-
Find out that there's a-
but it
allow
says
us
they
to
need
take them out.
prior written requests. They have to have
I
a
guess
prior
that's what,
written
I guess we're
request.
assuming they're not
And you
gonna
would say
follow the
no.
policy.
Right.
But I think the point of the policy right
Yeah,
now
we
is
can't
for
write
us to
policies
write
based
the
on people that are
policy.
not gonna follow it.
Right, I don't think that's gonna save us.
Because
from
it
all
says
people
they
that
have to have-
disregard policies,
No, they're just
right?
gonna do
Yeah.
that.
It says they need
They need,
prior written.
So you say,
requests.
where's your written request?
And they don't have it, they
Right.
take the dog home.
so that's the process I'm
That's
talking
it.
about, like, I think that's the,
Yeah.
yeah. I think those things could happen any day without this in place, but we have to have this process or having the notice ahead of time and whatnot. All right. I put in a couple of things about the liability. That's it.
It's your horse, so it's so much.
Everything but the back.
Should we sit with this? Do you want it to go on? What would you like to do next?
Well, I think
We
you
do
have
have
some
a-
questions that.
I have
you've
one,
answered.
yeah, I have one question and then we put the insurance in there, but that's not really a question, but do we need to notify families? I don't know if that's a policy that we have to put that in there, if that's what you're
That's
looking
more
for.
like a protocol. that
I'm
we
not looking
have to-
school-wide, just the students that would be impacted by having the dog in a room. So if, let's say this, in my building at the middle school level, this student with this service animal is on team 623. Just the classes that they're in on that team are what I would think, I don't think the rest of the building needs to know anything about
No.
Oh,
it, just that.
well, yeah, but I could say the opposite, but we think we need to find out because
What about
really,
lunch?
this is the policy.
Correct.
Expect a therapy or a service dog to be in the building.
Yeah,
If we,
because what
it's a
about lunch?
possibility.
Phys ed.
In addition
And
to
with
allergies
that-
you might have phobias, kids might have
Right,
fear. of,
right.
or
So
something.
Not to mention
if you
the
didn't know,
shedding,
you'd
this
have to,
hallway,
yeah.
heritage
Wow.
collection, so.
That's just a custodial.
So
thing.
we can ask that, so we'll be, we do, okay. All right,
That,
Ready to move
I
on?
think that wouldn't be part of a policy. Anyway, that part of it would be more protocol.
exactly.
And that's, so,
And then-
That's true.
you know,
That's kind of what I'm, yeah.
The only other thing I found
Is it
confusing, and I don't know if it was just
Not
my understanding of it, is the very last
That's a
paragraph on the first page, to have an animal other than a service animal as an accommodation.
Yeah.
Does that mean we're moving away from dogs and it's just bringing other types of service
And
animals?
again, they
Comfort
just
turtle.
don't bring it in, but there are emotional support animals.
All right, but
That's
is that
what you do.
different than a service animal? So if you look
Yes.
at general A,
Yes.
service animal means a dog that has been trained with the only exception of,
Yes,
The miniature horse.
that
yes.
would be a hard, yeah. And there are adults that may require, you know, a support animal, and then that process would go through HR. So in that line, it differentiates the difference between a service animal process and just those like emotional support would go through.
Is there another
Special
policy
ed.
for that? Or is that,
What do you mean?
is there a separate policy that includes
your-
support animals?
No, it's
Okay.
just mentioning that anything other than that would go through the director of special ed or HR.
So we are allowing emotional support as well?
We're not calling it out, they're just saying if you get a request for an emotional support.
Here's
that's
what
how
you
it
do.
has
We're
to
not letting anybody know.
It's not necessary,
I'm putting my
but
bunny
again,
in next week.
it's up to the
Bunnies are
school, I
very
think, to
cute.
determine what the need is there.
That's it. Fine, other than
All right,
that.
so we'll hold on to it till we get the answer to your question. And then, so should we, any other questions you want me to write down? Other than that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
So we're just gonna table this till the
Yeah.
next meeting, or are you gonna get an answer? And if-
Well, I was thinking table into
Okay.
the next
Yep.
meeting, but I don't know, is that an option?
Yeah.
The other?
Sure.
All right. This is the next policy. This is going into old business, okay? So this is the JUAA, we were working on physical restraint and crisis intervention. And the formatting and everything about it was getting very, very difficult. So we've had time to look at it. We did try to clean it up as far as formatting, and if Jen, I don't know if you want to speak to some of the things that you maybe looked at and cleaned up. But review it again if you haven't. Any questions for Jen or comments for the group?
Thank you. It looks like you put a lot of work into this.
Thank you.
We just want to say what you did.
Well, we took what we did last time, we figured out that,
Yeah, there was a ton of
yeah,
redundancies.
yeah, and I just cleaned it up and tried to put it in a nicer flow of reading and stuff like that.
Some things it looked like, and tell me if I'm wrong, because we're cleaning up, maybe where we thought we were gonna strike it, we put it back because now it made sense in the flow. Is that true?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, And I really think like that advanced word tripped me.
Yeah,
Really
well,
bad.
both of us, because that's how we use it in a different way.
Right, and when they wrote this, that wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
For us, so.
Yeah. Is that included in here anywhere? Do we call it something different?
Just as it's a training.
It just, yeah, number 2, content of training.
Because there are two different trainings.
But the only different,
Yeah.
it's still under.
Yeah.
You know, that you still have to do the same thing, follow all the policy, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's not specified any
Yeah.
differently.
It does talk about identifying program staff that have received that advanced training though. I think that's on page 3, letter E.
Oh, yeah, E.
With anything else, you have to do the same
Yeah.
thing that everybody else does.
That's great. Much better.
Yeah, it's definitely better than that first copy was a mess.
So when we look at page 5, that whole letter E is just coming right out and it flows beyond that. So that's correct, right?
Mhm.
Well, wait a minute. So how are we, what's heading the EFG?
It's gonna be on.
Right.
It's just gonna be under
Prohibitions,
prohibitions?
yeah.
Okay,
It's just, that's why I called it out, because it looks
Okay.
funny.
yeah, it does. Yeah, okay.
All right, does anybody have any, I don't want to rush it, I just feel like we're sitting, so that's why I just keep asking, but still looking, or do you feel as though you have any questions about this?
I think it does flow better. I think it, yeah. I am not
Yeah,
the
it covers
expert
that.
on
It
this,
does
so
cover everything.
I know.
it looks like it does.
So we'll move this on to the first read.
We go
Yes,
to the
okay.
first read?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so.
Oh, wait,
Uh-oh.
sorry, it's
Oh,
on the
no,
last.
Tracy.
Second.
Too late.
No, it's a quick. The nurse must check every student that has been,
It's
had.
already said up in, section.
See
Yeah,
how
I
quick
saw.
that was? You answered that
It's in
question.
the procedure
Oh,
part, yeah.
Excellent, because
That's on
every
page-
time
on
there
page
is a
2.
restraint,
Yeah.
the
It's on
nurse
page 2.
or
Yeah.
principal has to
The,
check that.
It's on page 2.
Page 2.
Excellent. See that? Not so bad. It's okay, everybody.
Teresa.
All right.
Making sure somebody checks the trials.
Just to regroup, we're gonna hold on till next June, the service animal policy, JD, and get a couple of answers. If there are anything in between, like if we didn't, I can send a list of questions. And then JGAA, physical restraint crisis intervention with students, will go on for first
First
read.
read.
Okay.
This month?
Is it, yes.
Enough time for this
Yeah.
one?
Tuesday is the next meeting.
Oh, that's not enough time, is it?
Yeah, she
Oh, all
allows
right.
me to give her that.
Oh, perfect.
tomorrow. I get
Okay.
special privilege.
Excellent.
But by noon.
Yeah,
Oh, they go.
So put the hammer down.
okay. The 17 other questions I'll send to you overnight.
First
No,
read.
we're all good.
We can turn it back to you.
Okay, looks like we have public comment.
No comment?
My name is Kathy Sundberg. I'm a board president for 33 years. I was at the last whole school committee meeting to talk about the safe zone school policy, whether we have one or not, and spoke with Mr. Wiggins afterwards, and he emailed me about this meeting and said, "You have to come to this meeting and see if there was anything happening with the policy regarding safe schools."
So to refresh my memory, make sure we're talking about the same thing, if I remember correctly, that was more around the protocol that we have in place in Warwick to, and the letter we sent out to families about, not, with working with ISIS and like the different, yeah. So as far as I was told that we have the protocol, that they
Nice.
feel as though the protocol would be enough. I haven't heard it needing to come to a
The
policy.
protocol being the letter from Ms. Amber.
There is an actual procedure that we have that
There was
all
a-
our principals have.
There was a procedure and, the governor, it came from the governor, what their suggestion was. And I'm almost positive it was verbatim what we already had in place. So we didn't have to make any adjustments.
So do we have a policy?
It's a
Protocol or
procedure and protocol, not a policy. They're different.
Okay, what's the difference? I don't, tell me what.
A protocol. So policy is a little bit more of a legal document that sort of, it can kind of incorporate some protocols usually, but it doesn't have to go to that level. A protocol just could be how we react to situations. So every principal was on a conference call with our attorney around that topic, specifically going through the protocol and how we would handle something like that if we were to get someone coming to the door and looking for non-documented students.
Okay, but in the policy manual, then there is nothing.
No.
Also, some of that too, if I can add to that.
Yeah,
a
please
little bit. Yeah, sure. So policy starts with an idea and it comes to this committee. And we've had some policies that will live in this committee for months, if not a year, being discussed. A procedure or protocol, the superintendent puts out a directive and says, starting now, this is what you do. And because of the sensitivity of that situation, for fear of it being held in policy for, even if it took a month or two, that would be too long. The superintendent put out a protocol directive to the principals, do A, then B, then C, then D. Should this happen in your building, to address the sensitivity of the situation, the timeliness of it. So now, do sometimes procedures and protocols turn into policy? Absolutely. And that would be something that this team would, take up, so that's,
Yeah. For that situation.
yeah. So, I mean, it would go through,
Yeah,
the chair of the committee and discussion here around this. But the good news is, in the meantime,
Yep.
there's a protocol and procedure in place to keep everybody safe.
I think we discussed it in policy and
Mhm.
as a whole, because we brought it straight to policy to say, this is have to live as policy or protocol. And our lawyer even said, no, as long as you have the protocol is in place, you don't need to have it as a policy.
And Mr. Wiggins also told me he's the same lawyer as for North Kingstown, Mr. Henny.
Henny is, yes.
And I have North Kingstown's actual policy that they adopted. Is it possible that Warwick have something like this, or you don't feel the need?
I get my directive from the school committee. So when they discussed it, it was determined that the procedures, I
It
mean,
was
it
actually
wasn't
Mr.
something.
Hennies that told me, because I said, oh, okay, is this a policy? And he said, it doesn't need to go as policy, it can live as protocol.
Well, if you would like, I don't see why we couldn't.
We can put it
that.
on
Yeah.
for new business, yeah.
I mean, just reach,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Is the protocol written somewhere where if a person requested it, they could get a copy of what our
That's what I was
protocol
just
is?
asking.
Plus, I think,
Yeah.
again, not to speak for Attorney Hennius, and I would defer to him.
Yeah.
But one of the other things to consider, and again, this might be a wonderful policy, so by no means, but if it's written in policy and then something changes federally tomorrow, it might take a month or two to change the policy, because if we violate the policy, then we would be held accountable for that violation of policy. Whereas a procedure can be updated or a protocol can be updated immediately. So that would be what I would talk to
Okay.
Hennius about.
Thank you.
Because let's say this became policy, then all of a sudden, the unknown that we can't even think of today happens tomorrow. It could be a couple months to get that changed to the policy committee. This team only meets once a month. It needs to go to first read, which is a monthly meeting, second read, which is a following monthly meeting. So just something to ask in
Is
the
it-
context of this.
Yeah.
It's harder to adjust a policy because all of a sudden the federal government makes a change than it is to just put out an amendment to the protocol.
Is it possible for a member of the public to request from the superintendent a copy of the protocol that we follow with that concern?
I was under the impression that Mr. Galligan had sent you that protocol, no?
I got the letter that Ms. Stanbrook sent home.
Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't have a link in it, so I didn't know.
Check to see if it was
All
sent.
I can-
There's not a specific protocol like
But I
for
was just assuming
for
that when I-
principals to utilize in case the event of someone shows up at the door?
Yeah, I mean, I at the surface level would say, of course, but again, I would defer
Yeah.
to the lawyer just because, not so much for this, but sometimes a protocol, a communication's made, but a specific protocol is kept, internally, you know, I'm going to make a parallel.
For security
For
reasons?
security, reasons, exactly,
Correct.
right? So we wouldn't
Okay.
share out the directions to the principals.
Correct.
on a security issue.
Yeah.
This was very close, if I'm recollecting the procedure, very close to that, whereas if the playbook was given out, then they would find a workaround, you know what I mean? So it'd be something we'd want to ask.
So a generalized letter was sent by the
Correct.
superintendent.
Yes,
Letter went to
that
the
did.
community, and
Yes,
then a
I
specific,
got that,
A,
yes.
B, and C, and D. If D doesn't work, go to E, do this was sent out to the principals.
Okay,
That shouldn't be public, that.
It might be able to be, but we would just want to check on that because if it went public and then they found a loophole, then all of a sudden the very thing I think we're trying to do here would be up in.
with that, like they could make a request to the superintendent.
and
The
then we can
superintendent
explore.
could then talk with
Yeah.
Andrew Hennius and then.
It's not us being
Yeah, I
cagey
mean-
either, like trying not to share anything. It's
Keep it
just
kinda
making
safe.
sure that we don't inadvertently
I
put
totally
a group at
understand.
risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're all
Can
looking
I
for the
read
same
North
thing.
Kingstown policy with somebody and just, but since she's the same lawyer,
Yeah,
probably wrote part of it.
Yeah, probably.
Mostly.
Was it also, what the director of education, what she sent to us, was that made public? Was that-
Commissioner of
The
Education.
commissioner, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
a lot of what the Commissioner of Education has been doing is having some updates for school superintendents only.
Oh.
So tight-lipped because of the very thing I was mentioning,
yeah.
where if it's in the wrong hands, then all of a sudden it's been a very sensitive situation.
There is some public documents from the Attorney General, Nerona, because
Yeah.
he shared that. I'm sure you've seen that from Nerona and Fonte Green. There is some guidance on there on the Attorney General's website. If you want to take a look.
Okay.
And I feel like that's around the same time that the principals met.
It was
The language
January
was all
27th.
about- Yeah.
And the other thing to consider too, and I know when speaking to Attorney Hennius about this, back on this, is that he was also working with he works with about, I think about half of the school departments in the state. He
Okay.
represents, his firm represents. And there was a conversation too about, flirting a line between putting out too much policy because of fear of being targeted, like if you know, a district or a municipality goes too strong one way, then they somehow might hypothetically be targeted
I think-
and made an example of. So it was really a lot of thought went into this to try to make sure that we're keeping everybody
Yeah.
safe.
Do you know if there is anything state level happening? Is there to do any of the?
It depends on the office, like Mr. Atherton said, the Office of the Attorney General's put out some stuff, but he's leading an effort nationally, actually, him and other attorney generals to kind of put some attention to this. And then I know some other state agencies like the Department of Ed, to Ms. Kirby Chapman's point, is doing a lot behind the scenes, but I think is cautious not to take a spotlight.
I had heard there was like a house proposal.
Yeah.
That the state would have a policy.
Yep.
But I don't know what
I'm
that is.
skimming this, and this looks very similar to what was given to us.
Mhm.
during that time period. Which is what we're following. Were you both here on the same subject?
Yes, yes. Sorry. My name is Allison Kasmarek. My kids are long gone from the Warren system, but I don't know all the concepts.
Thank you. So I'll follow up with Andrew and then send you
Okay,
an email.
great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. I need Sean when we get to something.
Okay.
I think.
Next scheduled meeting, I think we have June 3rd is our first Tuesday at 4:30. And I think I put it on our agenda, and then we'll talk about July as I know last year you didn't meet in July, or we're hoping not to meet in July.
Correct.
We'll hopefully be able to continue that.
I see it, yes, why?
All right.
Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Any opposed, any abstentions?